But obviously, yes, the first 2 days of NBA free agency, we are in full swing. And a move that initially I dismissed now kind of scares me.
Scares you?
It scares me, yes. Well, it scares me, yes.
So bad for the Knicks, you think?
Yeah, exactly. Even though we're going to the finals. I mean, we're fine. When we have
the NBA finals?
Yeah, look, Hartenstein is gone, and Mitchell Robinson is going to be hurt. We're going to play 5 guards. It's going to be great. But
the NBA finals is what you're referring to?
We're great. We're going to go. However,
are the Celtics still in the East?
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Really?
We're better than the Celtics.
Champions do not.
They won. They won. Big deal. They're selling the team. They won. Come on. They'll be lucky they can field anybody.
They're not selling the players.
Who knows? Yeah, it is a weird thing to say, hey, we're looking to sell the team, but here we're giving out $1 billion in contracts now.
Yeah, so that the new owners can raise more money to pay these guys that we signed.
Do you want the good players or do you want the bad team with no money? Like, what do you want? We'll figure it out. But the Paul George move to Philadelphia, because I'm the first guy to tell you that it baffles me the popularity that Paul George has had now going on a decade. Like as much as we talk about him,
he's a good NBA player. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but it's way too much. Like Paul George takes so much of the conversation for being a guy who has disappeared many times and gotten hurt and not really led his team when we thought he was going to be one of the next great players in the league. It's been a decade talking about Paul George. I'm like, wow, the guy's been an all-star many times, but he has not led his team hardly anywhere. And when they need him most in the playoffs, Paul George disappears. However, that being said, going to the Sixers now, where they need him to be their third best player. And Paul George has never had to be a team's third best player. He's always had to be their second best player or their best player.
Well, it's Philadelphia. Right? With injuries, they may need him to be the second best player.
He may be the best player. I mean, Joel Embiid in and out. But look, injuries are a thing, and clearly, if they do have one of their stars get it, because they also re-signed Tyrese Maxey, gave him $200 million. He's a phenomenal player.
And Paul George, $200 million.
Yeah, so now they have a big three. Yes, Joel Embiid's health, that's
same
always
contract
going to be a thing. But
with Embiid, that's also another $200 million.
But if you're talking about, hey, that's a pretty good 1-2 punch, even if Embiid is out with Maxey and Paul George. But the fact that he needs to be their third best player, that's what scares me. Because when you have to rely on him as your second best player, like the Clippers did, forget it, right? Forget it. Look what happened to the Clippers, right? Oh man, look at this era of the last 5 years. Yeah, it was just we were happy being competitive, right? That's all they wanted to do was be competitive, right? And they were going to try to bring him back. The Clippers just wanted to be competitive. That's all they wanted the last few years. You think they're trying to win a championship? They're not. We're going to stick with Kawhi. We're going to stick with Harden. We just like being competitive and being in the conversation. But Paul George didn't really elevate them. However, now that he doesn't have to be that guy and he can pick his spots more and he can not, because he doesn't do well in the spotlight, he's even more removed from the spotlight now because Philadelphia is going to rely on Embiid, Maxey, and now we brought in Paul. Yes, $200 million, but it's Embiid and Maxey, and then it's Paul George. This may finally be the right situation for him for extended success and playoff success because he doesn't need that. It's a big difference going from the number 2 guy on the team to the number 3 guy on the team, and that finally might be what works for Paul George.
Paul George was not in the playoffs for a couple of years, and then this season, I looked it up, he shot 37% from three-point range, so you'd say, oh, fine, that's very good. That's better than a third of his three-pointers going in. But overall, it was only 41% shooting in the loss in 6 to the Dallas Mavericks. And when the Clippers, during the year we got the COVID and the stoppage, and then they continued and had the playoffs in the bubble, the Clippers were very good that year. Mm-hmm. If they'd have played out the full season, that's at least a 55-win team. And Paul George the shooting was 36% in the first round and 43% from the field in the second round. So he's had better regular seasons.
He's a player that gives you a lot of stats, puts up a lot of numbers. And when it gets to the playoffs and you need a little bit more, you just don't get it. He does have big games. Let's say he doesn't have big games, but if you're going to move on in the playoffs, you need your stars to be your stars. And Paul George has not been that guy. Now, with the Sixers, does he need to be as big as Embiid and Maxey? He does not. We've already seen more from Maxey in one playoff series against the Knicks than we saw from Paul George the last 5 years. So now that he's coming in here, I mean it, this might be finally the right thing for him. Hey, yes, I'm going to get a lot of attention, but I'm not getting the attention of these other guys. Now, we're going to get to Greg Berhalter coming up in a second. But about a half hour ago, we had Jason Lockenfor on with us, who was on fire over the USMNT and their loss tonight to Uruguay that knocked him out of the Copa America. If you missed it, get it on the Best Of podcast that goes up on iTunes after the show. I'll find it on Twitter on Fox Sports Radio. But I brought up to him and I said, the one thing outside of Berhalter is we don't get officiated on the international stage like other teams do. And I brought up 2 points. I brought up the fact that both Panama and Uruguay were able to dictate physical play over the line, and which that needs to change. Especially Panama was allowed to dictate play over the line, where this is where it's yellows and reds, and we didn't see that. We saw the official tonight was in over his head from the beginning and lost control of the game a half hour.
And by the way, the U.S. captain, Christian Pulisic, after the final
that's the thing.
whistle.
Well, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. So we have that, and then we have the goal by Uruguay, which on VAR was offside. Somehow it is not rectified. Uruguay gets to keep the goal. Now, in the big picture, it didn't matter because Uruguay still was going. Even if we tied Uruguay, we're still going home. Right? So it happens. Now, those two things definitely are things, right? It's not something that, Jason Lockenfor said, it might be sour grapes. No. And now after what we're going to tell you about what happened with Christian Pulisic after the game, it's not. We're just not officiated the same way on the international stage. We don't get calls. We don't get calls that you think we should. We got knocked out of the World Cup a few years ago because they missed a call on a different game that was when they had a goal that was clearly not a goal that bounced off the post, but it doesn't matter. They didn't look at VAR. And we got knocked out because that goal was allowed to stay because that was a goal that knocked the United States out.
And also on the world stage, part of the problem is kind of like the Major League Baseball Umpires Union. They'll just have everybody get a playoff turn or something like that because they're a union. They can do that. Not on merit. Everyone gets a rotation in. And at the world stage, they want people from all parts of the world, good refs or not, to participate, even though these are the games that ultimately count more than anything else.
So, if you think, Blake, because I'm not someone who always blames the ref. I don't like to blame the referees. We talked about it during the NBA playoffs. But just a couple of things that I see. Hey, I definitely bring that up if I'm USMNT. Hey, you know what? Well, we're not officiated like the other teams in the world.
Not that it costs them, but it's a thing.
Whether it's an anti-American bias or not. And then following the game, now you tell me if there's still not an anti-American bias. Following the game, Christian Pulisic walked over to the referees to shake their hands, which is one of the great traditions in soccer. As bad as you can be as a referee, whatever you say as a player, at the end of the game, everybody shakes hands, right? It's not quite the, and here it is, the Stanley Cup final, the team shaking hands, the best tradition in all of sports. But you see that. You see no matter what happens during the game, no matter what is said.
The referees are standing together in a line on the side, holding the ball that was used and not leaving the field first.
Yes. Pulisic goes over to try to shake the official's hands. And you can see he puts his hands out. He says something. I don't know what it is. But whether it's, I don't know if he points to his left. I don't know what he's saying. But he puts out his hand to shake the hands of both referees. Neither referee puts out their hand. In fact, the one official takes his hands and puts them behind his back. So you tell me now if there's something out there officiating-wise, America, when after the game is over, neither official would shake Christian Pulisic's hand. The United States captain, the captain walked over to shake hands with the officials after, and they wouldn't shake his hand.
And I believe that was the lead official in the middle that put his hands behind his back.
He put his hands behind his back.
Not the guys holding the flags.
No. They
were completely dirty about it.
It looked really awful. I mean, they look awful because,
you would think Pulisic did something to their family.
Yeah, exactly. Or they I'm so sick of what he said and who knows what said during the game, but now it's over, right? It's over and you shake hands and the officials wouldn't shake his hand. You tell me that you still think we're officiated properly?
Christian Pulisic went nuts when on a shot on goal late in the game, he thought that on the swing of his foot was contacted by the defender from behind and that it wasn't a clean block but rather should have been a foul. And he went nuts, and one of his teammates finally separated him from the ref, but clearly the ref took that personally.